My name is Zoe Mitchell. I am 26 years old. My brother-in-law Ryan slapped me across the face at my parents' dining room table while the pot roast was still steaming, and the only sound after my chair crashed backward was my mother whispering, "Zoe, don't overreact." The very next day, I handed Ryan an envelope in the parking lot of his big subscription box startup in downtown Kansas City. He smirked like he had already won, fingers squeezing my shoulder as he said he was glad I had finally decided to support the family business. He thought the envelope held a cashier's check from my parents' retirement savings. It actually held the paperwork for a criminal case that could cost him his company, his freedom, and the last bit of control he had over us. Before I tell you how that dinner and that envelope blew up, my family tell me in the comments what you would do if your parents begged you to stay quiet just to keep the peace. And tell me where you are watching from, because I know I am not the only little sister who got sacrificed at the table. The night it happened, my parents' house in South Kansas City smelled like garlic rosemary, and the store-bought pie my mom pretended was homemade when guests came over. I sat at the far end of the table, the default spot for the extra chair, while my older sister Kelsey and Ryan took the head seats on either side of my dad, like they were the primary family and I was visiting. That was how it had always been. Kelsey, the golden child with the Pinterest wedding, and the entrepreneur husband, my parents' conversations orbiting her and me, the younger daughter who paid her own way through community college and worked in digital marketing, expected to smile and pass the roles. When Ryan started talking about one more bridge round to keep his subscription box company alive, everyone's eyes slid from him to my dad, then to me, because somehow it was always my job to soften my dad when Kelsey and Ryan could not. Ryan said he needed just $20,000 to get through the next quarter, swore a regional grocery chain was this close to signing a partnership, and my dad stared at his plate. In that way, that meant he wanted to say no, but did not know how. My mom asked if your business coach had seen the numbers, which was code for, "We know this is a mess." And Kelsey rolled her eyes and said, "Mom, you don't understand how startups work." My dad finally murmured that they had already pulled $10,000 from their retirement last year and another $7,000 from their emergency fund in January. Kelsey's fork clinked against her plate as she snapped that parents help their kids, that other dads put houses in their kids' names. I heard myself say quieter than I wanted, "They're not an ATM, Kel." Ryan turned his head slowly toward me, that tight little smile on his face, and said, "No one asked you, Zoe," like I was a stranger at his table. I should have swallowed it, but I was tired of watching my parents drain the life they had built working double shifts at the hospital and the post office, while Ryan drove a leased SUV with custom rims. I told my dad he could not afford it, reminded him I had helped him log into his retirement account and knew exactly how much was there, and Ryan's chair scraped back as he stood up so fast his water glass tipped. "You went through his accounts," he demanded, like I had hacked a stranger instead of resetting a password written on a sticky note. My mom said my name in that warning tone Kelsey hissed that I was trying to sabotage them, and Ryan leaned over the table, jabbing a finger in my direction, calling me jealous and bitter, and still living in that basic apartment while I'm out taking real risks. I got up because I was not going to be screamed at sitting down. "You still owe them $17,000. You never paid back what you promised," I said, and that was when his hand came across the space between us like a door slamming. The slap hit harder than I expected, a hot burst across my cheek that knocked me sideways into my chair, which tipped and crashed onto the hardwood. For a second, I did not hear anything, just the metallic rush in my ears, and then my mom's sharp, "Ryan," and my dad's useless, "Hey, hey, hey," like this was a minor scuffle at a ball game. I tasted blood in my mouth. My phone skidded away across the floor. When I pushed myself up, my eyes stung not from the pain as much as from realizing no one was coming around the table to help me. Kelsey stood behind Ryan with a hand on his arm, glaring at me instead of him, and my mom's first words were, "Zoe, Just sit down. Please, we don't need a scene. In the big front window beyond the reflection of the chandelier, I saw our neighbor across the street. Nina Patel pausing with her dog on the sidewalk and staring up at the chaos in our bright dining room, hand frozen halfway to her mouth. My dad eventually muttered that dinner was over and pushed his chair back, and my mom followed him into the kitchen, both of them suddenly very interested in leftovers and dishes. Kelsey hissed that I should apologize because I had provoked Ryan, and Ryan himself stood there chest heaving, then dropped his voice and said, "This is what happens when you undermine family," as if he had proved a point, instead of hitting his wife's younger sister in front of her parents. I grabbed my phone from the floor, hand shaking, and locked myself in the half bath. My cheek was already blooming red in the mirror, the faint outline of fingers visible like some ugly watermark. When I finally came out, my dad put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Zoey, why don't you head home and we'll talk about this later," like I had been the one who lost control. I drove back to my Westport apartment with the radio off, replaying every second, and hearing my mom in my head. "You'll ruin your sister's marriage. Do you really want that on your conscience?" The next morning at the marketing agency, the open plan office and the tap of keyboards felt like a set someone had built to distract me. I kept my hair down over the side of my face, but fluorescent lights do not hide much. My coworker Riley Chambers rolled her chair over, took one look at me, and asked, "Who hit you?" There was no point lying. My brother-in-law. The money, my parents telling me to be understanding because Ryan was under pressure. It all spilled out. Riley listened, then said, "You need a doctor to document that, and you need a lawyer. And you need to stop protecting people who would never protect you." She wrote down the name of a friend, Allison Drake, a criminal defense lawyer turned victims advocate, and pushed the note into my hand. On my lunch break, I called my parents instead. My mom's voice was too bright as she said, "Zoey, he didn't mean it. You know how stressed he is." And my dad muttered that no one needed to get lawyers involved, that we could handle it as a family, especially if Kelsey was trying to have a baby. After that call, I dialed Allison. Her voice was brisk but not unkind as she asked where it happened, who was present, whether I had any proof besides my bruised face. Cameras, audio, text messages, she asked. I told her no, thinking about my apartment instead of my parents' house. She told me to take photos of my cheek, go to urgent care so a doctor could note the injuries, and save every message from Ryan or my family. "If you decide to file a police report, I'll walk you through it," she said. "But do not text him. Do not post about this online, and do not talk to him alone. Abusers thrive on conversations with no record." I promised I would follow every rule. That night, outlining a timeline of every loan my parents had given Ryan, I suddenly remembered the security cameras they had installed after a porch theft, tiny black circles in the corners of the living room and dining room that my dad watched on an app I had set up on his iPad. 2 nights after the slap, I drove back under the pretense of dropping off Tupperware, let myself in with the code while my parents were at a church meeting, and grabbed the iPad from the den. The security app was still logged in. When I scrolled back to Saturday night and tapped dining room motion, 6:17 p.m., there we were on the screen, frozen around the table. The system had audio. I heard myself telling my dad he could not keep draining his retirement, heard Ryan call me jealous, saw him loom into the frame, and then whip his arm sideways, my head snapping back, my chair going over. No accident, no barely touched her. Just a man hitting a younger woman in her parents' home. My hands shook as I emailed the clip to myself and to Allison with the subject line, "You asked for proof." Within 24 hours, I had been to urgent care, filed a police report, and met a detective who watched the video twice. Allison told me the district attorney's office would almost certainly file charges, and that we should track down Nina as a potential witness, only for me to learn a few days later that she had flown to India because her father had a stroke and would be gone for months. When the notice came that the county was filing a misdemeanor assault charge, Allison said Ryan would be served by a process server. I heard my dad's voice in my head saying we should handle things as a family, and something stubborn twisted in my chest. I want to hand it to him, I said. Allison warned me that it was a bad idea, but finally agreed on one condition: I would give him the envelope, say nothing, and walk away. The next day, I met him in the parking lot outside his brick office in the Crossroads district. About time, he said, eyeing the manila envelope. Your dad finally came to his senses. I handed it over. His smile faded as he saw the court heading. You're having me arrested, he demanded. I kept my voice level. The state is prosecuting you for assault. I just told the truth. When he hissed, you can't prove anything, anger made me break my promise. The dining room camera got everything I said, video and audio. His eyes widened, then narrowed. That night, still shaking, I also broke Allison's no social media rule and posted a vague Facebook status about people using family as a free pass to hurt you and drain your parents' savings. 20 minutes later, someone texted me a screenshot with the message, "Thanks for the evidence of your harassment. My attorney will love this." Allison called at 8 the next morning. Tell me you did not post about this, she said, already knowing the answer. When I admitted what I had done, and that I had warned Ryan about the camera, she did not sugarcoat it. You just handed him 2 talking points, she said. We can still win, but from now on you say nothing to him and nothing online. I mean it. While I was busy beating myself up for every mistake the universe sent me, proof that Ryan's violence and lies were not new. A week later, in the middle of a barbecue sauce campaign at work, I got a text from a number in my phone as Grant. Networking event. It said Ryan did to me what he's doing to you. We should talk, with a blurry photo of a legal document bearing Ryan's signature. At Messenger Coffee the next morning, Grant laid out emails, bank statements, and photos of yellowed bruises on his ribs. He and Ryan had launched an earlier snack box startup, and when Grant confronted him about $30,000 missing from their business account, Ryan shoved him into a file cabinet hard enough to crack a rib, then buried him in paperwork and a cheap settlement. Around the same time, my cousin Colin called from St. Louis to tell me our Uncle Dennis had wired Ryan $20,000 for fake medical bills, first for a rare autoimmune disease Ryan claimed I had, then for surgery he said Kelsey needed. It was not just my parents he was bleeding. I drove straight to my parents' house with Colin's screenshots. My mom opened the door with that pinched look that meant she had already decided I was causing trouble. I told them about Grant's cracked rib and Uncle Dennis's fake emergencies, laid the bank transfers on the coffee table like exhibits. My dad sat down heavily, his shoulders sagging. He said, "You didn't want us to know," my mom whispered, "that you'd be embarrassed to take money." I laughed once sharp. Mom, I borrowed $20 for gas when I was 19. When have I ever been too proud to ask you for help? Tears welled in her eyes, but not for me. He promised he'd pay Dennis back as soon as the next round closed, she murmured, still clinging to his story. In that moment, I realized it was not just that they favored Kelsey. Admitting Ryan was a con man would mean admitting they had chosen him over me again and again. Back at work, Riley listened to all of it and said, "You don't just have an assault case. You have a pattern of financial abuse. People like that don't stop. Talk to a reporter." She put me in touch with a local business journalist, Holly Rivera, who agreed to look at documents and promised she would not publish anything without proof. Ryan's retaliation came before Holly's story. Through Allison, I learned he had hired an aggressive attorney who filed a civil counterclaim accusing me of defamation and intentional interference with business relations, pointing to my deleted Facebook post and even my police report as proof that I was weaponizing the legal system to destroy a growing company. He called HR at my job and claimed I was unstable and obsessed with him, that he worried I might create a hostile environment if our companies ever crossed paths. HR pulled me into a glass-walled conference room and asked stiff questions, but Allison had already sent them a letter explaining the criminal case and the video, and Riley quietly told our boss what really happened. My job survived. My dignity took a hit. Holly's article went live a few weeks later with the headline, "When Family Becomes Leverage," describing an unnamed Kansas City entrepreneur who pressured relatives for cash, lied about medical crises, and left a former partner with broken bones and empty accounts. Anyone who knew us could connect the dots. Within days, a local investor announced he was reevaluating his participation in a subscription box startup, and the district attorney's office confirmed they were moving forward with Ryan's case. The court date was set for October at the Jackson County Courthouse. The morning of the hearing, the sky over downtown Kansas City hung low and gray as I walked through security with Allison at my side. Ryan sat across the aisle in a navy suit I had seen him pitch investors in, his attorney whispering in his ear. Kelsey sat beside him, eyes red-rimmed, twisting a tissue, and behind them, my parents, my mom, clutching her purse, like a flotation device. The prosecutor started with the basics. My testimony, the urgent care doctor's note about bruising and jaw pain, the photos of my face blown up on a monitor that made me want to crawl out of my own skin. Then she played the dining room video. The entire courtroom watched my dad stare at his plate. My mom flutter her hands, Ryan's posture shift from smug to furious, and his hand crack across my face, my head whipping back as the chair tipped. Ryan's attorney argued it was a family argument taken out of context, but context does not change physics. After that came Grant calmly describing missing money and cracked ribs, and Uncle Dennis' voice shaking as he admitted wiring Ryan $20,000 for illnesses that never existed. The prosecutor had one more surprise witness. When she called Kelsey Mitchell Cooper, my sister stood up behind me, walked to the stand, and without looking at me said, "Yes. I saw him hit my sister." I didn't want to believe it, but I can't lie anymore. Ryan shot to his feet, shouting that I had turned her against him until the judge threatened to have him removed. After closing arguments, there was a long, quiet stretch while the judge reviewed her notes. My palms were slick on the table. My parents sat frozen behind me. Ryan stared down at his hands. When the judge finally spoke, her voice was measured but firm. She said families are complicated and emotions run high, but none of that excuses a grown man striking a younger woman at a family gathering. She cited the video, the medical records, and the consistency between my testimony, Grant's, Uncle Dennis's, and Kelsey's late but clear corroboration. On the charge of misdemeanor assault, she said, "I find the defendant, Ryan Cooper, guilty." The word guilty hung in the air heavier than I expected. Sentencing came next, a year of supervised probation, mandatory completion of a certified batterer intervention program, a no-contact order requiring him to stay at least 100 yards away from me at all times, and restitution covering my medical costs, and a modest amount for pain and suffering. It was not prison. It was not all the money my parents and uncle had lost. But it was a record, a public line in the sand that said what he did was not just a family disagreement. The fallout hit fast. Investors who had been skittish since Holly's article pulled out completely, citing reputational concerns. The bank called in a line of credit Ryan had personally guaranteed. Within a few months, his subscription box company shut down its website, replaced with a bland, "We are no longer" operating page. Holly wrote a follow-up naming him now that there was a conviction on record, and former employees and landlords started coming out of the woodwork with their own stories of unpaid wages and rent. Grant and another former partner filed civil suits, and Allison told me the weight of those cases helped push Ryan into personal bankruptcy. Kelsey moved back in with my parents for a while, then quietly filed for divorce. My mom called me once to say, "Your sister is devastated. Are you happy now?" And I hung up without answering, my hands shaking, but my decision steady. My parents never faced handcuffs, but they did face the consequences of years spent prioritizing appearances and their older daughter's marriage over their younger daughter's safety. They lost a chunk of their retirement. Their church friends put together enough clues to know the story was about us, and the pitying looks my mom dreaded finally arrived. Their anger settled on me because it was easier than admitting how badly they had misjudged him. A year later, my life looked smaller in some ways and bigger in others. I had moved into a light filled apartment closer to downtown with hardwood floors that creaked in comforting ways and no shared walls with people who had ever taken Ryan's side. I started seeing a therapist. Riley recommended someone who helped me untangle years of being the kid who absorbed everyone else's stress so the family could keep pretending everything was fine. My marketing job turned into a promotion after I led a successful campaign for a regional charity, and I picked up freelance work helping small businesses with social media, the kind of honest hustle Ryan always pretended he was doing. I met Grant for coffee now, and then, not to dwell on the past, but because we both knew what it felt like to almost let someone convince you your pain was an overreaction. Colin visited more often, sometimes bringing Uncle Dennis, who apologized for believing Ryan's lies, even though the apology should never have been his burden. As for Ryan, Allison told me he was working a basic sales job in a strip mall outside town, cold calling people who mostly hung up answering to a manager instead of being one. His LinkedIn page had quietly changed from founder to vague business professional, and the bankruptcy filings listing all his unpaid debts were public record for anyone who cared to look. People sometimes ask, usually in hushed tones after a couple of drinks, if it was worth it. The court dates. The family split the holidays spent alone because I refused to go back to a house where my parents still talk about my ex-brother-in-law like he is just going through a rough patch. Justice in real life does not look like television. It looks like probation instead of prison, and a restitution amount that does not touch what was taken from your parents or your uncle. It looks like therapy bills and a bruise you can no longer see but can still feel on damp, cold mornings. 6 months after the trial, my mom left a voicemail saying, "Zoey, your sister misses you. We all do. Can't we just put this behind us? Families fight, that's normal." I listened once, then hit delete. I had spent 26 years being the flexible one, the daughter who kept her pain small, so everyone else could stay comfortable. Ryan was not the only one who taught me my safety ranked below Kelsey's comfort. My parents did that long before he showed up. So yes, it was worth it, not because his punishment matched the harm, but because I finally drew a line I should have drawn years ago. I live with the fallout, but I also live with the knowledge that I did not stay silent, that I did not hand my parents' savings and my own self-respect to a man who saw us as resources to mine. If you are listening to this and recognizing your own parents, your own sibling, your own Ryan, remember, you are allowed to choose yourself even if they call it betrayal. Tell me in the comments what you would do in my place and whether you would be willing to stand alone at that table if it meant finally being safe.